This is my 2004 Infiniti G35 Coupe. My very first car and the one that started my YouTube channel. It's been sitting untouched for over 2 years.
Might be the last time you ever hear it run.
But in the last video, I fired it up and took it for one final drive before everything changes. And no, I'm not going LS or HEMI like everyone else. I'm keeping it all Nissan. Nope, it's not a RV26, and no, it's not a SR20. And dare I say, I'm going with something that's even better? We'll see you in the comments section. This G35 is getting the largest displacement engine Nissan has ever made, the VK56 DE, a 5.6 liter V8 most people have never heard of. But in this chassis, it's gonna be a monster. Now this isn't your typical swap. We're cramming a massive V8 into a car that was never meant for it. The G35 comes with a 3.5 liter V6. That thing is tiny, and this is gonna be a massive step up. And not only that, but I'm keeping the 6-speed manual to keep it raw and real. Today, the original VQ comes out.
Oh, shoot.
The engine that powered this car for over 200,000 miles. And then we begin measuring and planning to make sure the VK fits right. We're at 29, yeah, 28. To all the G and Z owners, this is the swap series you've all been waiting for. With the VK engine being ready to swap into the G35, it was time to do something about this VQ. So let's get it in the shop and get ready for a teardown.
Who is driving that car?
Alright, goodbye VK35. And that's the last rev this motor will give for this car. Now typically to pull an engine on a car, you would use an engine hoist, or a cherry picker you might say. But since I just got this 2-post lift, I'm going to use it to my advantage. But first is step 1. Disassemble everything on the top of the engine. That includes the intake, vacuum lines, fuel lines, coolant lines, engine wiring harness, and anything else that might be in the way. Thankfully on this G35, there's only one engine harness and it only has 2 connectors. A little bit of relief since the QX had 3 engine harnesses and 17 connectors. Rest in peace to my brain, that wiring is going to be a nightmare.
I need a flashlight for that one.
Now what's super annoying is the ECU is tucked up right underneath the dashboard.
Oh,
So we're going to have to remove a few parts to get to it.
oh wow. Just right here. So it was right there. And then this other one, I think is just right to the left here. There we go.
And now we just had to yank the wiring harness through the hole.
Down there.
Another one.
Oh, maybe. I got it.
Hell yeah, that was freaking simple. That's what you get when you just have a manual transmission. So the only thing I think we have left is the AC and the fuel lines, coolant hoses, and a power steering, but we might need to wait on that. I did drain the AC, but just extra precaution. Good so far.
Oh, nothing. I expected that to freaking spew out.
It's been sitting a little bit. So what are you gonna do with this motor? Sell it?
Probably. Need a motor?
$200.
Minimum 175, minimum 5, sold 7150 JDS.
With most of the stuff disconnected in the engine bay, it's time to move on the inside of the car and disconnect the shifter assembly.
Look how heavy that thing is.
Holy crap.
It's just a weighted shifter. Oh, there's some Packery wiring in here.
Who did that?
410s right here. Oh shit, he taped all this. There we go, that's it. There's the actual transmission right there. You can see the aluminum.
Not much more to do up top, so let's get this thing up on the lift so we can start disconnecting things at the bottom. And this lift is going to come in clutch for this project. What is that?
Is something we picked up? Oh, is that off my shoe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's off my shoe. What the heck? Cheap demos.
Shoving it back in there?
Well, you did pick up a couple things.
Oh yeah, some rocks.
Oh! Look at all the rocks you picked up back here.
Oh damn. Oh shit, it's probably hot. Oh, it's cold. It's ice cold.
The amount of rocks this thing picked up is very surprising. With that out of the way, Devin snips off all 37 zip ties so we can get this splash shield off.
Looks like I worked on this thing. Yeah. A bunch of zip ties in.
And you know what? If everything works out, I'm putting this thing back together with bolts.
On top of the nest.
First things first, let's get this exhaust off.
What is that?
I don't know. I don't know who just tightened these.
Yeah, I don't know either.
This is just temporary. Oh shit, we got it. Wow, look at those threads.
That's nice. Yeah.
There we go.
Should have started it like this.
We can hook everything back up.
It ain't worth it.
It would sound just like that thing sitting over there.
Wow. That was so cool. I am jealous.
And of course we had our fair share of those stubborn bolts.
If I remember, I think I stripped that one. Oh, it is stripped.
What is this?
That's not even the right nut for it.
This G35 is just like every other one on the market.
I used to do some hackery back in the day.
Got it.
Oh shit.
We thought it'd be a good idea to get the sway bar out just because it sits pretty low.
Damn.
Per usual, the end link bolts are pretty hard to get off. You're probably wondering why we're taking so much stuff off the bottom. That's because we're actually going to drop the engine, not pull it. That means the entire subframe is going to drop with the engine. No need to pull the whole front end of this car or the hood off. We're just going to lower this engine on a pallet and then lift the body off. Off comes the front subframe brace. Now let's get that drive shaft off. This is the Concept Z lightweight aluminum drive shaft. Great mod to free up horsepower and lighten up the drivetrain. Unfortunately, we won't be able to use it for the swap, at least in its original form.
Kind of warm.
Good choice.
Other than the sway bar, the only other suspension parts we need to disconnect are the lower control arms and the tie rods. Unlike most unibody cars, this G35 has an extremely small front subframe.
Well, if we disconnect it from right here, we can probably swivel this thing out of the way.
I was worried that the lower control arms might get in our way when we try to lower this engine, so we're going to disconnect the lower shock mounts so we can swivel them out of the way. So one of the most pain in the ass things that we came across was the U-joint that connects the steering shaft to the steering rack. It was absolutely frozen on and we had to pry it off. So after a very long struggle, eventually we got that off, disconnected the tie rods, removed the upper and lower radiator hoses and drained all the coolant. Then we lowered the car down and focused our attention one final time on the top of the car, which include the heater hoses, which were a major pain in the ass, especially the side that I'm on that has the coolant bleeder port. There's a ground wire that connects the engine to the chassis on the right side, and the final thing was to disconnect two power steering lines, one that goes to the reservoir and one that goes to the cooler.
Okay. Got everything disconnected from the top. Ground wires on both sides and some power steering lines over here. And I think we got all the wiring disconnected. Fuel lines are disconnected. And I think the only thing holding it in right now is 4 bolts, 2 on each side for the front subframe, and then 2 bolts in the back. We had the other 2 removed for the transmission mounts. So we're gonna use a pallet jack, just slide the pallet underneath here, undo those bolts, and it should just lay down on the pallet jack, and then we'll lift the whole car up and we'll be able to pull the whole engine out. All right, going down.
I also put these big wooden blocks underneath here to give us some more room to take out the bolts.
The trans is still floating.
Oh, it is.
That one's already out?
Yeah. Were you able to see the other side?
I don't know. I'll let you take a look.
It's kind of difficult, but you get it.
Out?
Yep.
Sweet.
With the transmission disassembled, the only thing we have left was the front subframe.
Yeah, I figured.
Tight?
He's a big boy. See you go down just slightly.
There it is.
All right.
It's right there at the beginning there.
And now the engine should be resting on the wooden block.
Going up. Oh, shoot.
And to no one's surprise, just when we thought the motor was free,
Hold up. Hold up. Oh, shit. Go down.
it seems that we've ran into a problem.
Is it that? Oh, it's his arm. Your arm's in the way. Well,
Oh, I know what it is. The starter wire. I think we got all the wiring disconnected.
So yeah, I forgot a step. It actually was the positive cable for the alternator, not the starter. So we'll get that taken off, and we should be good.
Bless you.
Okay, that wire should be able to pull up.
what do you think, Moose? Last thing? He said no.
We'll see about that. This is the end of the road. 200,000 miles of red lines, oil leaks, and BQ rasp. But today, we say goodbye.
All right, I'm going for it.
Dropping. Getting there. Oh, yeah. Man, things are too easy with a lift. Things are too easy with a lift. That works pretty slick.
And finally, the motor was out.
It's a nice calendar you got. Alright, we'll go ahead and load that in the side of my van and I'll take her home.
Evan's putting his go-kart.
Go-kart sold, so the beat, yeah.
Damn, I think it's gonna work. Try to go ahead and just put the pallet underneath here.
Might as well raise her in. Now there is something that'd be a lot cooler than this swap, and I think it'd be a 12-valve Cummins.
Yeah, it would not stick out the hood.
You definitely have to cut the firewall.
All right, so we just got the VQ35 out. It was actually pretty easy lowering it down on those blocks and the pallet jack. I think that was probably the best way to do it. We still have the frame, the transmission mount, and steering rack, and some other miscellaneous stuff that we'll probably just have to lift this motor up with a hoist and pull that stuff out so we can put it back on the car. I was able to get some rough measurements of these when they were both in the car, but I want to go ahead and get official measurements. On the VQ35, we're gonna go where the cam covers are right here. Now the power steering pulley does sit out a little further, but it does sit lower in the engine. So we're looking at about 23 inches right there. That's the widest point.
Get us close enough. That's probably good.
Right there. We're at 28.
So 5 inches?
Yeah, 5 inches. Where the V is, since it sits like this, it's actually gonna sit in this area here, so this probably doesn't matter. But we're at 29 there. Yeah, 28.
And that's with no exhaust manifolds
Yeah.
or anything.
But again, I think that's counting this part. It's like
Yeah.
sitting out another inch past that. And I think this part is gonna be somewhere in here where it's not gonna interfere with the strut tower.
What about the height crank pulley at the top of the intake?
Yeah, so
Or even the bottom of the oil pan?
yeah, let's just go very bottom of it. So we'll go very bottom of the oil pan here. Up to the intake manifold, looks about 27, I'd say.
Yeah. This thing's got a crazy deep valley in it. This intake sits really high.
What was that again, 20,
It's 27.
27? I'd say that's about 33. So it's pretty tall, but so this oil pan, there's actually, let me just get back, damn it.
You're
Hey.
breathing super loud in the mic, I'm sure. Getting kicked out.
Go. You look at the M56 intake manifold, it sits way lower. We can't run that, unfortunately, because that's for a direct injection motor, and this is port injection. and the port injection goes into the actual plastic piece here. There is a company though that sells like a $400 intake manifold that probably sits like another 3 inches lower. And then on the bottom, I chop off this oil pan and make it a little shorter, and then the pickup tube, I'll have to shorten that as well. Now the length, and we're gonna need an adapter plate, so we'll have to like add an inch. We'll just go to the pulley there.
Call it 26, 25 and a half.
Oh, this one's a lot freaking shorter.
Call it 21, so about 5 inches for an extra 2 cylinders
So
in the back there.
It seems like all the way around we're about 5 inches taller, 5 inches wider, and I actually don't remember, but I'll put that stuff up on the screen. So the transmission, we're obviously keeping the manual transmission. We're not gonna put that piece of shit 7-speed automatic. We're not doing automatic transmission. Because the engine is 5 inches longer, this is gonna sit farther back. We're gonna be able to delete this bracket right here. There's 2 on the top and 2 on the sides. We'll delete that bracket, and there's a company that sells a shifter that mounts actually on the body of the car, and it kind of mimics like a gated shifter, which I think would actually feel pretty good. It'd feel better than the stock one here. I want to delete this firewall, one, because it sits kind of far in here, and I think that's gonna mess with our exhaust manifolds. Look how flimsy this is. Like, it's just literally just sheet metal. It has no structural rigidity to it. But yeah, this is all getting deleted. It looks to be about 4 inches from the firewall to over here. And then obviously there's a ton more room here that we'll be able to pick up just by deleting that. So between the VQ35 and the VK56, there is about an 80 to 100 pound difference from what I've seen. I haven't weighed these two engines, but that combined with having to move this V8 a little bit farther past the center line of the front wheel is gonna add quite a bit of weight in the front. So deleting this, I should be able to move the engine back just a little bit. Every inch that we move this engine backwards from where it sits, we're gonna be able to save about 9 pounds up front. So try to get it pushed back as far as we can. Another thing that we can do, which I'm really excited for whatever reason, is to relocate the battery to the trunk. I think that will save a lot of weight up front. That battery weighs 40, 45 pounds maybe, super heavy battery. When we put that in the back, it's taking that weight off the front and putting that in the back, so that's gonna help with our weight distribution. Something later down the line that I'll probably do is reroute the whole coolant system. I'm thinking about taking this whole radiator support and doing some kind of custom thing in the back where the trunk is. Kind of like how race cars and drift cars have their radiator in the back. The battery and the radiator relocation should save us about 100 pounds up front. So I think by doing that, this thing will honestly keep its weight distribution from stock. All right, I think that's it. I'm probably talking way too much.
So obviously I could talk all day about my plans for this project, but talking doesn't get the job done. Pulling the motors from the QX and the G35 is the easiest part of this entire project. I just need to focus on getting the VK in the G35 and getting the car to actually run and drive before I try to do too much other stuff. The next big step was getting both transmissions off both engines so we can figure out how to swap them over. This actually isn't my first time pulling off this transmission. My first biggest automotive job was actually swapping the clutch on my G35. I had the original clutch from 160,000 miles and I replaced it with the JWT lightweight flywheel kit.
Let's see how fried this clutch is. Ooh, a lot of burn spots on the flywheel there, but for the most part, the clutch looks decent.
This JWT flywheel is pretty slick. It's got a replaceable friction plate, as you can see from all these Phillips. It can hold up to 500 horsepower, and I'd love to keep it for the swap.
Hey guys, that's what happens when you drop your clutch a little too many times.
So I'll get this flywheel off, and we shouldn't have to deal with this motor ever again.
That's what the back of it looks like.
Now we can start working on getting the transmission off the VK56. As you can see, there's tons of extra wiring for the transfer case and the automatic transmission, which most of it we're not going to use. We need to get all this wiring off, which is actually part of the engine harness. We also need to take off the transmission lines and the dipstick. Now before I start taking the bolts off, I need to figure out how I'm going to get this thing off of here. I can't just manhandle this thing around here like I did with the manual transmission. This 7-speed with the transfer case assembly has got to weigh close to 500 pounds. I'm going to use a couple of engine hoists, one for the transmission and one for the engine. Now I'll talk about this later, but there's really not a good spot to lift the VK56. I have this purple toe strap wrapped around the engine mounts. It does its job, but it's not ideal for the plastic valve covers. If I'm going to be moving this engine around quite a bit, I'm going to need to make custom mounts. Before we take the transmission off, we got to get the torque converter disconnected. Now torque converters are specific to the automatic transmission. Their main purpose is to dampen the harshness between shifts, and they basically look like a big donut. To disconnect the torque converter from the flex plate, there's going to be a small removable cover near the bottom of the engine, and from there you can access the 4 bolts that hold it on. You can turn the crank bolt as I'm doing here, so you can get access to all the bolts. Now that all 4 torque converter bolts are out, I can start cracking loose all the bolts that connect the transmission to the engine. Once those are off, we can finally separate the engine and the transmission. And don't let the torque converter fall because that thing weighs about 50 pounds. But we're gonna go ahead and pull this flex plate off for now, and it later rose to my attention that I'm gonna need to keep this part for the manual swap. So it's a good thing I didn't throw it away. So if you guys watched a few videos ago, you know that I purchased an Infiniti M56 with this motor. Unfortunately, this engine had some oil pan damage and the previous owner ran the engine with no oil in it, which looked to be a considerable amount of time based on the discoloration of the rods in the crankshaft. All the bearings were spun and this engine had metal shavings spread throughout the crankcase. So long story short, this long block is pretty much destroyed. Now you might be asking what's so special about the M56 motor versus the QX56 motor. Now for those of you that don't know, this motor over here makes a considerable amount of more horsepower than this motor over here. Torque numbers are pretty similar, but the horsepower is a lot more. And the reason being is because this is the original VK56 motor. This is the VK56 DE. There's a couple different versions of the DE. This is the latest one. As you can see, it has the variable valve timing. I believe they introduced that in 2006. And this motor is the VK56 VD. I had a ton of people in the comments saying, why didn't you go with a Nissan Titan motor? It makes another 50 horsepower. Well, you're probably talking about this motor. This is the VD. They introduced it in the Titan, I believe in 2016. And just to throw this out there, typically the Infinity's gonna make more power than their Nissan counterpart. And that is because Infiniti is just the luxury brand of Nissan. Most of it just has to do from tuning from the factory, and usually there's no real major mechanical differences. But looking at this one, the M56 has the dual throttle bodies that's specific for the M56 and the Q70s and some other ones that are similar to that. The Nissan Titans, the QX80s, 56s, all of those will just have the big single throttle body similar to this one. The major difference that makes the more power between these two is the direct injection and the variable valve event lift. This is this thing right here and over here. It's similar to variable valve timing, except this, instead of adjusting the cam slightly, this is actually gonna open the valves more or less depending on the event. And by event, I mean maybe going wide open throttle or being higher up in the RPMs. It's gonna open those valves a little bit more to increase the airflow. As you can see, it's only on the intake cam, not on the exhaust. There's a bunch of other major differences on this engine as well. A lot of people said, could you possibly take the crankshaft and the rods and put it in this one and just rebuild this one? Now, why not take the short block from this one, meaning take the heads off and all the other accessories, and take these heads and all of its accessories and put it on that short block? Well, there's a reason for that, and that is because the compression ratio is different, the pistons are different, the rods are obviously different, and I think even the crankshaft might be different. So that idea is pretty much off the table. The only way I could have ran the M56 motor in the G35 is if I got another M56 motor that was actually working, or if I just got a VK56 VD from a Titan or Armada or any of the other Nissan models, and basically take this intake manifold and throw it on there, all the other little bits that are specific to the M56 motor. And I was really tempted to do that, but after doing some research, I really decided just to go ahead and do the swap with the newest VK56 DE. It's time to talk about this motor. So the reason I decided to go with it is just the simplicity of it compared to that thing. There's less wires. It's hard to tell, but this thing has about 20% less wires than that thing. This is actually the ECU from the QX56. You guys know 350Zs, G35s, all of that. The ECUs physically look exactly the same as this, and the connectors will plug into this. I've already sold the ECU for that motor, but it actually has 3 connectors on it, and it looks entirely entirely different. And not only that one, but it has another ECU that runs just the variable valve event lift. So that would just be a complete nightmare to wire that all in. Another thing is this motor is actually significantly smaller than that one. The intake manifold sits a little bit higher, but there is aftermarket solutions that makes it sit lower. That's why this thing almost makes the same amount of torque as that one. I keep saying it, I'm just gonna say VVEL. That makes the heads extremely big. If you look at that one, it sits way farther back here. I feel like that would get really close to the firewall and the brake booster. If you look up Z1 Motorsports on YouTube, they have a G35 that had this swap. So obviously it's possible, but I have a feeling that would be really difficult to fit and there probably had to be a lot of cutting involved. Another thing is the aftermarket support. Now, it's not a VQ, so it doesn't have a ton, but there is some out there. If you look at that motor, there's almost nothing. You're not gonna find lifter springs or aftermarket cams for it. I haven't looked, but you're probably not gonna find a whole lot of tuning options, especially with the VVEL. That thing is an absolute nightmare to tune. And you're 100% not gonna find upgraded fuel injectors for that thing. And that leads me on to another big reason why I bought this thing is because port injection. Aftermarket port injection injectors, most of them are universal. If we're gonna run some E85, which I really plan on doing, we're gonna need upgraded fuel injectors. I don't even think that engine can run full E85 safely. It could probably run a mixed tune, kind of like my BMW. And this is not gonna happen soon, but I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. If we plan on running boost on this thing, we're gonna need bigger injectors. So if I was gonna run the VD motor, I was gonna have to stick with being NA. A lot of people said in the comments, these motors love boost.
Just under 2,000 horsepower out of a stock block. This is a VK56 out of like your Nissan Armada, your Titan. Just switched from the 2J to this thing. And now this is a weird looking engine at first. Most people don't know what it is. You don't see it in racing, but stock blocks, stock heads, I believe stock crank made 1,966 horsepower on the dyno.
And the final thing, which I've already kind of mentioned, is tunability. This motor's got up rev, it's got aftermarket standalone ECUs that I could run on it if I so choose. That motor, I know they tune them, but it's gotta be expensive with the VVL. And as for making our power back while we're NA, we can do a ton of things to this motor to get really close to that motor, if not beat it. The biggest thing would be a less restrictive exhaust, which is all gonna have to be custom anyways to fit this thing. We're gonna be running some long tube headers, free-flowing intake, probably a more free-flowing intake manifold. There's an aftermarket for the 90mm throttle body off of the LS7. By the way, this is, I think, a 70mm throttle body. This is the same size throttle body off of the VQ35, which is absolutely insane. Upgrading that would make a huge difference. Now we run some bigger injectors with E85 and a tune. That's probably gonna be a ginormous power gain. And the only other thing that could really wake this motor up is aftermarket cams and heavy-duty lifter springs. Stronger lifter springs will allow us to increase our RPMs. And being a naturally aspirated motor, the horsepower tends to be pretty linear, so the farther we can go in the RPM, the more horsepower we're gonna make. But I think with all those mods combined, I think we'll 100% be the horsepower and the torque of this stock VD.
If you guys have any other suggestions on how I can make more power, let me know down in the comments below. I'm all ears on this project and I'm not against any ideas. In the next video, we'll be getting the manual transmission hooked up to the VK56 and hopefully getting the new engine in the G35. As of right now, I had enough footage to make this video about an hour long, but I'm currently waiting on some key parts to get the transmission hooked up, and I want to make each video as cut and polished as possible for those of you that are following me along in the swap. I appreciate all that have stuck around to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video.